Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry about your ankle, Karen.
Oh, thank you.
Could you pronounce, Rabbi, can you pronounce the last word of the second line?
She'ola.
She'ola.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
translation doesn't say that. The translation says Sheol.
Well,
Like
actually,
have
the
on the next
translation
page.
says toward Sheol.
But how do you know it's She'ola and not She'ola? How do you know where to put the emphasis?
Oh, the ah here at the end is a ending that gives us directionality. So the word is Sheol.
Yeah, but why does it
But
say
I mean, yes,
Sheolah?
you could pronounce it Sheolah,
Yeah.
but that would be more if Sheol were there was a feminine aspect to Sheol. So it's not a feminine aspect, it's Sheolah or toward Sheol.
So you need to know that
You
Sheol.
need to know your suffixes and prefixes and what they're doing to the word.
Like
So we get that all the time. We get Artsa and Mitzrayma.
Yes. That's right now.
Okay, nine lines down, the last word.
2, 4, 6,
May.
8,
May I?
9.
Ella,
May alai.
May I lie? But then how about now the next to last line, second word from the end.
Yeah.
Eli.
Alai.
So even with both the different A's, they're both a lie and may Allah lie.
Yes, because we're in Sephardic, not Ashkenazic. Otherwise, it would be me oloi. Like the
Alright, so
difference
both
between
Alai, okay.
Adonai and Adonoi.
So it's may I lie for both, and
Yeah, because we're always doing the patak and the kamatz are both as.
Okay, so we can do universally for both. Okay, and line 3.
Wait, don't we say A for that? Eli?
Down here we say alai.
Yeah, that's what.
Up here we say
talking about
me
the other word.
alai.
I'm talking about the other one.
This one.
Yeah. Now line 3, third word. There's no line 3. No. I mean, verse 3. Verse 3. I'm sorry.
Verse 33.
3.
Three.
Just 3.
The down in 45. Yes.
There's no vowel
No.
over that.
No, there's no vowel there because it got wiped out when I wiped out the trope mark.
So it should be what?
It should be al.
Al.
Rather el echav.
Okay, that's what I
mean.
wanted
That
to
combination is always L is 2.
That's what I thought, but there was nothing there, so I wanted to just check.
It disappeared in my re-editing.
I got it from an English translation.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
I just wrote it in 3,000.
Yeah, Aleph Lamed is always going to be L.
That's what I thought, but Jeffrey and I were just trying to talk about it. We weren't sure.
Yeah. Any other questions on just the general? All right, so just to remind you, Judah has been pleading the case on behalf of Benjamin, explaining how precious Benjamin is to their father, how Benjamin is really the only one to remind their father of his beloved wife, as opposed to the mother of all the rest of the boys.
Recording in progress.
Oh, it's me.
Oh, hi, Diane. Yeah, it's you. Yeah.
Oh, hi, I have to turn this off. Oh, wait.
You've got good special effects.
Yes, it was a real resounding entrance.
I guess so.
So now continuing, v'haya kir oto ki ein hana'ar v'met v'horidu avadecha et sevat avdacha avinu biyagon sha'ola. And we do lengthen the sha'ola kind of thing, because remember, we're in the end of a verse. And so just as we changed from lacha to lach, and eved to aved, and eretz to aretz, and geffen to gafen. So when we're reading it, we would read it with expression. We would read it Avinu b'yagon sha'ola. And give our sense that we've come to the end. So, v'haya, and it will be, kir oto, so ke, as or like, ra'ot, seeing,
Seeing.
o, him. So all of that, we've got the prefix as or like, kamo is ke. We've got the o ending that tells us that it's the masculine, singular, third person pronominal suffix. And then the ra'ot is an infinitive form of the verb seeing, to see.
Mm-hmm.
So he's saying now, if we go home and leave Benjamin here with you, O master of all of Egypt, then we will get there and it will be that it will be as if our father is seeing him not there. So that's what we're coming to. So
Can I just,
as he will be seeing him, ki ein hana'ar, for there is not the Ute. Vamet, and dead.
what?
Vamet, literally, and dead. The idea, he will be dead, he will die.
Can I ask a question? I'm just a little confused, because I'm not caught up. Did they already leave and bring him and he's there with them? Or
Yes, this is their return trip. They have gone, they went back, found the silver in their saddlebags, said to their dad, we don't know where this came from. Dad said, well, just hang on. They use up all the food. Dad says, you have to go back. They say, but we can't go back because we told that guy down there that we have another brother. And that guy said, if you don't bring your brother, don't bother coming down and looking for food. And so then he doesn't want to send him. And Judah is the one who says, I'll take responsibility. And we had two stories. Remember, we have the blue story where Reuben said, if I'll take responsibility, if we don't bring him back, he can kill my sons in his place. And Judah says, if we don't bring him back, then it will be my guilt. I will be responsible for him, and you can have my family. Hold my family in ransom. And they go down, they bring the money down that had been returned to them from the first trip, plus the extra money to buy the food for the second trip. And they buy it, and they're traveling along the way. And little do they know that Joseph has set up his whole intrigue where he put the royal goblet into the mouth of the sack of Benjamin, along with returning all of their money, both from the first and the second trip. And they're traveling along, and all of a sudden, the Egyptians catch up with them and say, how is this that you repaid our kindness by giving you your food and you stole the goblet? And they all say, we didn't steal the goblet. And Judah says, the one you find the goblet, that's the one that will be guilty. Then they find it in Benjamin, and Judah says, oh no, that wasn't the way I wanted it to work out. And they all get dragged back down to Egypt. And Joseph says to them, you think I'm not such a diviner that I couldn't figure out what you were doing? I knew all along who took it. Meanwhile, in retrospect, I pointed out a lot of the clues that Joseph had been giving them, that somehow there was some shenanigans going along, that Joseph knew too much about these men to not have some connection.
Right.
And so now Judah is pleading because they had struck the bargain that whoever had stolen the goblet, that person would remain as servant to Joseph, and everyone else could return home. And now Judah has been spending all of these verses pleading, saying, no, we can't do that, because remember, we told you, our dad's an old man, and this is our little brother, and he's the only one who remains of our dad's favorite wife, because the other boy is gone. And now he's continuing to say that if we return now, Judah says in 31, and dad sees ki ein hana'ar, for there is not the youth with us, then vamet, then he will die. But just very simply, and be a dead one, basically. A mate is a corpse.
Hmm.
Okay, you're in the first line still here?
We haven't finished the first line yet,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
but this was all the 30 verses of catch up to the first line.
Thank you.
So he will die. The horidu avadecha, and horidu is the going down from Yarad, going down, the opposite of Ya'al, going up. And so he will go down, avadecha, who is the he, avadecha, your servant. So now Judah's talking about his father, and Judah is constantly calling all of them Joseph's servant, which of course plays into that whole dream where they're all bowing down, they're all servants to Joseph way back at the beginning of the stories. And so what will be going down? Et Sevat Avdecha. And Seva is gray hair,
Oh,
the hoary head. So, and will be going down your servant, that is the gray hair of your servant Avdecha, Avinu, our father. So Judah is constantly going back and forth between first person singular and first person plural, talking on behalf of the brothers, sometimes by himself or of himself, and sometimes on behalf of all of them. So your servant, the gray hair of your servant, our father. Just to make sure Joseph knows who they're talking about. And this does parallel a lot of other biblical stories where we're given more descriptors than would seem to be necessary to get the point across. And so he will go down, biyagon sha'ola. He will go down in really great sorrow and agony, sha'ola, towards Sheol. Sheol is literally the pit. Sheol is where dead people go. There's no real indication in the biblical text what their conception of Sheol was, whether it was Hades, hell, the afterlife, the underworld, the netherworld, or simply the pit into which you put the body. But in any case, it's a fairly graphic description Jude is giving to Joseph that what will happen if they go back home now without Benjamin with them. Verse 32. Ki avdecha arav et hana'ar me'im avi lemor im lo avi enu elecha v'chatati le'avi kol hayamim. So now Judah says, Ki avdecha, now he's back to himself. Ki avdecha, your servant. Arav et hana'ar. Arav is a word that you already know in a number of different forms, because at the sunset time, it's the Erev.
Mm.
And in the wire or wall surrounding Sharon or Brookline Brighton, it's an Eruv.
Right.
So Arav really has some sense of binding or a bounding perimeter, or some area of definition of one side from the other side. So here the idea is I have set up an obligation on the Na'ar, on the youth, Me'im Avi, from with my father. And literally Me'im is from with. Or in more King Jamesian English, from whence.
From whence you came.
And that, in fact, is the same word that's in Psalm 121, Me'im Adonai, Where does my help come from? Comes Me'im Adonai, from God. But the idea is that it starts as being an intrinsic part of wherever it's coming from. So this boy was bound up with my father, and I set up a different boundary condition around the boy that would be my responsibility, as if he were my own beloved son, like yours. So that's the impact of Ki avdecha, for your servant, Arav et hana'ar me'im avi, for I have taken your servant, have taken as an obligation the youth from with my father. He's no longer going to be with my father. Notice above he was Avinu, our father, and now he's back to Avi, my father. And this is what I said to dear old dad, Lamor. Second line of verse 32. Im lo avienu elecha. So im lo, if not. Avi is I will bring. Avienu, I will bring him. Elecha, to you. So I will return him. I will cause him to come. To you, I'll bring him back to you. And if I do not bring him back to you, v'chatati la'avi, then I will have sinned to my father. Kol hayamim, all the days. That is, my sin against my father will not be expiated at any time. I will have a life sin sentence with no hope for parole.
When you say I will bring, avi enu, isn't that we?
No, avia, the root is the bet yud aleph, which is also the bet vav aleph, bo, come.
Mhm.
Avi is the causative, I will cause to come.
Right.
And then avienu, I will cause him to come. Sometimes the O is the third person singular. Sometimes the U is the third person singular.
Confusing.
Pronominal suffix. So avienu, I will cause him to come, elecha, to you.
Mhm.
And if I don't cause him to come to you, chatati la'avi kol hayamim, then I will have sinned to my father all of the days.
Wait, cause him to come to you.
Yes,
I'm confused because he will have sinned if he didn't bring him back.
right.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
he says. If not,
If I do
if
not
not,
bring
I
him
will,
back.
if I don't bring it back to you, my sin is to my father all the days. That's the translation.
Bring him back to you. But who's the you? The you is
To the father.
is Joseph, isn't it?
No, it's to the father.
No,
he's
but
talking-
remember the last word of 32 is lemor, which is saying.
Okay.
So we have nested quotation marks, you'll notice.
I see. Okay.
So this is Judah reporting to Joseph what he said to Jacob. I said to Dad, if I do not bring him back to you, Dad.
Yep.
33, the ata, and ata with an ayin is now. So now I'm going to propose a counter offer to keeping Benjamin here and not sending him back to his father. Ve'ata yeshev na avdecha tachat hana'ar eved la'adoni v'hana'ar ya'al im echav. So, and now yeshev na. Yeshev is sit or dwell. We just leishev basukah. We just sat in our sukkahs or dwelt in our sukkahs. So yeshev na, but yeshev here has more of the causative, cause to sit or cause to dwell, and na is always a please. Please let remain, let dwell. Avdacha, your servant. Tachat hana'ar. Tachat in Hebrew literally is under, but it carries the force of in place of.
Oh,
Instead. So now let your servant dwell, tachat hana'ar, instead of the youth, eved la'adoni, a servant to my master, v'hana'ar, and the youth, ya'al im echav, will go up with his brothers.
It's kind of a screwy sentence, to be honest with you.
Well, not in Hebrew,
Not in Hebrew, but in translation it is.
which is why when you read translations, it's hard to figure out what word in English goes with what word in the Hebrew.
Like lost in translation.
Yeah. Because we have to reorder the words in English because English no longer has the place statements the way that Hebrew does.
mhm.
There's no case indicators. So here's my counter offer. Keep me as a servant and send the boy back home. 34. Ki ech e'ele el avi v'hana'ar einenu iti pen er'e vara asher yimsa et avi. So ki ech e'ele, for ech is how, e'ele, I will go up. How can I go up? How will I go up, el avi, to my father? The hana'ar, and the youth, einenu iti. And here again, that u ending tells us that it's the first person singular masculine, a third person singular masculine. Ein is there is not, einenu, there is not him. So how can I go back to dad, to my father? And the youth, einenu iti, and the youth is not with me. After all that I said to my father, that I just told you I said to my father. Because if that happens, pen er'e vara asher yimsa et avi. Pen lest er'e, I will see, vara, in the bad, asher yimsa et avi, I will see in the bad that it brings forth or causes or happens to my father. So I'm going to, lest I see how bad it goes for my father if I'm there and the youth that I promised to do. So a little bit of my sin will be with my father, but also I will suffer watching what I will have done to my father by not bringing the boy back. That closes out chapter 44, which again, remember in the Hebrew, in the Torah, there are no chapter markings. It was the later Masoretes who, and others in various translations, who decided to put in chapter and verses. So now a new chapter, but really just a continuation of the whole plea bargaining. V'lo yachol Yosef l'hit apek l'chol hanitzavim alav v'yikra hotziu chol ish me'alai v'lo amad ish ito v'hit vada Yosef el echav. Long sentence.
Yep.
V'lo yachol Yosef. So now Judah has finished talking, which is why it made a good place to break the chapter and start a new chapter. Judah has finished talking, and Yosef now, v'lo yachol, and was not able, or is not able, or will not be able, depending on what you want to do with yachol, but really just was not able, Yosef, lihit apek, to refrain himself. The hit, remember, makes it either a reflexive or mutual form of the verb. So he couldn't hide from himself. Joseph no longer was able to hide from himself his feelings and what was going on here. And he couldn't hide it not only from himself, but in relationship, in mutual relationship with everyone who was standing around there. So he couldn't refrain from or hide from L'chol hanitzavim. And nitzavim, we know, we just finished that one at the end of last year's whole Torah cycle. You are standing this day, all of you. And alav, literally, they were standing on him. But again, the alav is they're standing in wait upon him, or standing in deference to him, or standing in service to him. So it's more than just omeid, standing up. This is nitzavim, standing at attention. So he could no longer hide from himself and from all of those around, those who were standing. Vayikra, and he called out. Hotziu kol ish me alai. And hotziu, the word is yatsa, go out, send out. Hotziu, cause to send out. So he's saying to everybody, leave. Cause to go out. Kol ish me alai, every man from on me, or from around me. So
Well,
he
so
sends
he's-
everybody out.
So he said, instead of, he's telling them to leave versus bring them all out to me.
No, from me, me alai.
It's from me. Okay.
Me alai. Bring them out from on me. So send everybody away. And they did, because then we're told the lo amad, now we're having amad standing up as opposed to nitzavim attending.
Mm-hmm.
The lo amad ish ito, and no man stood with him. So now he's not sending the brothers away, because the brothers are not his attendants. And the brothers, of course, were given this vision by the author or the stage manager or the director that they aren't standing, they're bowing down. So going back to what we posited from the very beginning, one of the people who was standing right there with Joseph was the royal interpreter. The idea that Joseph was speaking Egyptian and not letting on that he understood Hebrew. And so when Judah says all of this stuff, the interpreter is whispering in Joseph's ear the Egyptian translation of all of the stuff Judah's saying in Hebrew, so that Judah will not know that Joseph understands everything he's saying. So who is he sending away? He's sending away all of the Egyptian courtiers and translators, which must have been, again, a bit strange to the brothers to suddenly see Joseph calling out in Egyptian, everybody out.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden they all leave, including the royal interpreter.
Mm.
So there was no man. So velo amad ish ito, and that's again in the singular. Before it was called ish, every man or each man, but now it's a man. Lo amad ish ito, and that might indicate then even the interpreter was not standing with him. Or there was not a man with him standing. So behit vada Yosef el Echav. Hit vada, the root is Yodea. No. Hit vada is a form of sharing knowledge, reflexive and mutual. That hit is always that reflexive mutual form of the verb. So now he's making it known. So this is, nobody is standing with him. Behit vada, in the making known, Yosef el Echav, to his brothers. And here again is that L with the vowel the way it's supposed to be. So we're now in the point where Joseph is going to make himself known to his brothers. But before he does that, Vayiten et kolo, and Vayiten et kolo bivchi, Vayishma'u Mitzrayim, Vayishma Beit Paro. So Vayiten et kolo, literally, and he gave out his voice. He gave his voice. Bivchi, in wailing. Bacha is to cry or to wail, to weep. So he let out a giant geschrei, because the Torah is best translated into Yiddish. That was the original language of God in the revelation to Moses.
Yiddish?
The Torah was given in Yiddish, and then Moses had to translate it into Hebrew.
Pre-Germany, right? Pre-German.
And what about if you're Sephardic?
Well, then that's too bad. Since it was a a Ashkenazi Yiddish professor who gave me that information. And he was actually the professor of homiletics and midrash. So of course that commentary is already midrash. But Vayiten et kol bivchi, and Joseph let out a giant geschrei. You see how that has much more impact than the English. So Joseph gives out his voice in crying, in wailing and weeping. Vayishma'u Mitzrayim. And this is, of course, an interesting thing because it's not Mitzrim, the Egyptians, but Egypt. But Vayishma'u is plural, and they heard.
Oh.
And they heard, and the they is Egypt.
Mm.
And not Mitzrim or Kol HaMitzrim, not the Egyptians, but all of Egypt heard his geschrei. And Vayishma Beit Paro, and even the house of Pharaoh heard it. And now we go to verse 4 for the continuity of the story. Vayomer Yosef el Echav, and Joseph said to his brothers, so all of verse 4, Vayomer Yosef el Echav, Geshuna Eli, Vayigashu, Vayomer Ani Yosef Achichem, Asher Mechartem Oti Mitzrayma. So Vayomer Yosef, Joseph says, El Echav, to his brothers, Geshuna. Geshu is the imperative of approach, come near, draw close. Geshuna, and so now we know all of a sudden he's speaking Hebrew because he no longer has an interpreter. So he dismisses everybody. He lets out a giant wailing sound, and then he turns to his brothers and all of a sudden says to them in their language, come close, please.
Where's the come close? Can you share that?
Geshu.
Issue. But wait, what about the line before? Did you skip that?
Yep, because the line before is not the continuation of verse 2.
Okay, I see. Okay.
So the line before is what was the interpolated when the editor redactor put the two stories together. And one of the things I like to demonstrate is if you read the red text straight through from Genesis chapter 2 forward, skipping all the blues, you don't feel like you've missed anything.
No.
Similarly, when we looked at Genesis chapter 1 and went straight to chapter 5, if we didn't know the story of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and the whole rest of the stuff, we wouldn't have felt like we missed anything. So when we go from verse 2 to verse 4, we don't feel like anything has been lost or anything else needed to have been said. He let out a giant cry, and he turns to his brothers, and the indication would be that he then switched from Egyptian to Hebrew, and he said, "Approach me, please. Geshu na Eli. Come close, please, to me." And you can imagine the looks on the faces of the brothers as they are stunned, recognizing that this guy sitting above them, standing above them, having done all this stuff to them for these past journeys back and forth, understood every word that they were saying to each other from the very beginning. And yet he is still the viceroy of Egypt. He's still not Joseph. He's just now somebody who is the second in command to Pharaoh who actually knows Hebrew. And there's nothing they can do but obey him. So immediately upon Joseph saying, "Geshu na Eli, come close to please to me, approach me now," Vayigashu, and they approached. Very simply, one word. Not even Vayigashu Elav, they approached to him. And so again, the impact of the orator way back when, Vayomer Yosef el Achav, Geshu na Eli, Vayigashu. Wow. It would have been done with that kind of expression. Vayomer, and now he says, Ani Yosef, Achichem. I am Joseph, your brother. But he doesn't leave it at that. I am Joseph, your brother, your plural. Asher mechartem oti, that you sold me, Mitzrayma, down to Egypt. Sort of rub it in, stab them, and then twist a little bit. The verse 3, which continues from 35 verses earlier or more, without all this Judah pleading stuff. And Vayomer Yosef el Achav, and Joseph said to his brothers, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. Ha'od Avichai. Ha'od, literally the more, but ha here, remember, is the indicator that this is a question coming up. So it's Od Avichai, my father's still alive, is the statement. Ha'od Avichai, is my father still alive?
So wait, so ha'od isn't the other or the more?
No, ha'od, it looks like the more, but remember that ha also says, here comes a question. So better to translate the Od Avichai, my father more lives, or more my father lives, is alive, and then is more my father still alive? Which doesn't make sense.
Because he already talked to them about his father.
They've been
before.
talking about his father and what they said to his father and what his father thinks, and that his father will die if they go back without Benjamin.
Yeah, I know. It's redundant. It's
What is this before this verse 3? What's the
What's the last blue stuff? You
Yeah.
have to go back a couple of chapters. Which we can pull up at some point. But yeah, if you go back through all of your previous texts, let me see. You're in 45 verse 3. And the previous blue text before 45 verse 3 was 43 verse 14. And prior to that, the bulk of the story was chapter 42. So you have to read a bit of chapter 42, a verse from 43, and then 45, skipping all of the other stuff in between.
But what was happening then?
It's the
Oh.
same kind of thing. It's still Joseph and his brothers in Egypt, but he's toying with them in a different way. Or testing them, depending on how you want to interpret this whole Joseph and his brothers interaction.
Yeah, it's quite an intrigue. And
So yes, and so the editor has those two stories, 42, a little bit of 43, and 45, and then has all of the rest of 42, most of 43, all of 44, and this opening of 45, and has to somehow wind them together with each other. But if you, again, read from 2 to 4, you're not missing anything. You
Yeah.
didn't feel like anything needed to be said.
Yep.
And if you read 3, then 4 doesn't make sense.
Mm.
Joseph said to his brothers, and then Joseph said to his brothers.
Mhm.
And Joseph said to his brothers, "Is my father still alive?" And again, imagine trying to set the new script to the stage where Joseph calls down to his brothers, "Hey, is dad still alive?" And then says, "All right, everybody, come on up here to me, and I'm going to tell you who I am."
Could we finish that after alive?
Yes. So, Ha'od Avichai, V'lo yachlu echav la'anot oto. And lo yachlu, they were not able, echav, his brothers, la'anot, to answer oto, him. So he asked them a question. And they are, in this one, as stunned as they were in verse 4, but stunned in a different way because it was a different story. So in verse 4, they were stunned and just mechanically came close. Here, they are stunned, and he asks them a question, and they can't even answer.
Nivi,
Ki nivhalu mipanav, and again, if you look at the very end, nivhalu, troubled from before him.
Oh,
But nivhalu here has that essence, that essential being stunned.
well.
I mean, you can just picture their response, because early indicators at the very beginning of the Joseph and his brothers' interaction, we do know that there was a royal interpreter at the very beginning of their first interaction. That royal interpreter then is no longer stated explicitly, but certainly would seem to be implicit within all of the stories. So in the blue story in verse 3, the royal interpreter now is not speaking to them, Joseph is speaking. And all of a sudden, after they've been going all through this stuff with the buying the food, the back and forth, whatever else has been going on, all of a sudden, this guy up there on the throne booms down to them in their language, "Hi, I'm Joseph. Is dad alive?" And again, remember the whole Joseph going down to Egypt in the blue story was different from Joseph going down to Egypt in the red story. To recall you way back to that, in the blue story, Reuben throws him into a pit, intending to save him later. They all go and eat lunch, leaving him down in the pit. A group of Midianites see this guy down in the pit, rescue him from the pit, and sell him to a bunch of Ishmaelites. And the Ishmaelites bring him back down to Egypt, and the brothers do not know where he is. All they know is that they go back to the pit and he's not there anymore. So in the blue story, they didn't sell him, and he can't accuse them of selling him because he didn't sell them. And in the blue story in jail, he had said, I'm here in another pit after my brothers threw me in a pit up in Canaan. So he's pitted.
Mm.
And then thanks to the Midianite, he's pitiless. So he doesn't say anything about that in the I am Joseph. Is dad still alive? And again, ki nivhalu mipanav, they are just stunned before him, in front of him.
They're probably scared a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all of they're troubled very deeply into their soul that Joseph, now who they last knew of, had been thrown into a pit and disappeared from the pit, is now living out the dreams of lording it over them.
Mhm.
So they can't even answer. And then you're going to have to wait till we get further into 45 and 46 before you hear more blue story. Because you'll notice next week, we're back to red.
What's the, I know it's going to be on the website, right?
It's part 15, since this week is 14. And the website has everything through 17. So if you want to take a sneak peek to where does the blue story come back again, you can look ahead. But meanwhile, Joseph has revealed himself one way or another, and 4 is where we continue. I am Joseph, and notice here he doesn't ask about his father.
Mm.
He's more concerned in here to say, I am Joseph, your brother, that you sold me to Egypt. So now he's laid the guilt of having sold him on them. Next week, he's going to have to do something about the guilt. And so this is our reading for next week. But before we get there, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to stop sharing. All right, before we get back to that, so any comments, questions, or anything on where we are so far?
It's getting really interesting.
And we're coming to the end of Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much the only thing left to do is get Jacob down to Egypt.
Oh my goodness, you mean we're actually going to finish Genesis? This is like 5 years.
5 years, well, 45 chapters in 5 years means 9 chapters a year.
Hey.
Next 5 chapters, next 4 chapters will only take us 6 months.
We should have a little celebration on the day that we started. 5 years
Yeah,
ago.
we'll do a real Kazakh.
Chazak. Yeah.
So yes, I mean, we have to get Jacob down there. And there's a whole thing about now Jacob that we're going to be getting to, about getting him to come down. You thought Jacob was hesitant and reticent to send Benjamin down. How about now going down himself?
Well, if he knows it's his long lost son, he would want to go down.
Well,
Does he believe it?
and does he want to abandon God to go with his son?
Hmm.
Ending God?
Yeah, that's going to be a part of what will come up eventually in Jacob. We've already had, and just another little spoiler alert, we had in earlier in Genesis, Avraham. God's only going to call 4 people by their
Twice.
name twice. And Jacob is number 2. We haven't yet seen a God calling to Jacob, Yaakov, Yaakov. That's coming up at the end in these next 4 chapters.
And then Moses?
Then Moses, and one more not in the Torah.
Oh,
The 4th person God calls by name twice is Shmuel.
Why? I mean, why is it in the Torah then? Why are we even talking about it then? Where is it?
It's in the book of Samuel, in the Tanakh.
it's enough.
There are only 4 people in the entire Tanakh that God calls twice by their name.
Oh, I thought you just said that it wasn't.
No, in the Tanakh, not in the Torah. 3 in the Torah, 1 in the Tanakh.
Okay.
But again, why those 3? Why not Yitzchak?
Mhm.
Why not Aaron? And if you're going to call a prophet, why not Isaiah? Why
Mhm.
Shmuel? So there are actually, the rabbis noticed the 4, and so the rabbis talk about what the 4 must have in common with each other.
Well, Abraham, he had to get his attention before he sliced his kid.
Well, that is one interpretation, but then you have to tie it to Yaakov, Moshe, and yeah, Yaakov, God needs to get his attention because Yaakov is on the, sort of wandering and lost and indecisive. Moses, get his attention to spend some time with the bush,
Mhm.
and Shmuel will be the same thing. So it could be intention getting, but there are other interpretations as well.
Okay.
However, that's not now. For next week, this is our reading. Va'ata al te'atzvu va'al yichar be'enechem ki mechartem oti hena ki limchia shalachani Elohim lifnechem. Just a point. We're in the Y text, which is theoretically Yud He Vav He, not in the blue text, which is theoretically Elohim, and yet we will be getting now in Genesis, and we got in other red texts, Elohim. There's some questions about whether this really was blue, whether this was red. If you drew it strictly on the basis of God's name, then this should have been blue. But if you do it on language and context and story, then this should be red.
Hmm.
The Y text, when it uses Elohim, is it talking about gods
Mm.
or the God?
So,
So that becomes a little bit of a question of biblical authorship and society.
so do you think there's more interchange between the groups at that time?
Or is this an editorial redactor restatement? In the earliest stages, there doesn't seem to have been much interchange between the groups because the parallel stories, especially earlier in the Genesis mythologies, really show no awareness of the other. So
I would think
that's
it would
for
go-
deeper interpretation. Yes.
Don't you think it would be the opposite, that it would go towards Adonai, and away from multiple gods as the periods, and later in the period?
Well, Genesis is still in our earliest form of the mythologies.
Mhm.
So most of Genesis may be relegated to mythology, may not even be legendary. That becomes the whole question of the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob stories, are they legendary or are they mythologic?
What's the difference between mythological and legendary?
Mythology, it tries to explain the world without any root reality
Yeah.
or root historicity. Legend is based in some historical aspect or event or combining of historical figures into one legendary figure. So Eric the Red is legendary. King Arthur may be legendary or may be mythologic.
So what do the people say about the Torah?
So is there historicity in Genesis? Is this a combination of various figures from the past whose stories have been combined into one red story, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, one blue story, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, two separate stories? Or are they antecedents, ancestors who have no actual root other than folktale? So when Elohim shows up in the red, for much deeper analysis than we get to, it may be gods as opposed to God. But anyway, ki mechartem oti hena ki limchia shlachani Elohim lifnechem. 6. Ki zeh shnatayim hara'av bekerev haaretz va'od chamesh shanim asher ein charish v'katzir. 7. Vayish lacheni Elohim lifnechem lasum lachem she'erit ba'aretz ulahachayot lachem lefleta gedola. And the other thing, by the way, remember Joseph has now been in Egypt for these many years. As Joseph, who's now doing the talking, incorporated the theology of the Egyptian gods into his language, which would be then the author's reflection on Joseph has sort of fallen away from understanding of Yud He Vav He, which would be the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob God. So we don't know what's going on here or what they were trying to say, or what can we say about it. 8. Va'ata lo atem shalachtem oti hena ki ha-Elohim, and here again it's ha-Elohim, v'yisimeni la'av lefar'o, ula'adon l'chol beito, u'moshel b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. 9. Maharu va'alu el avi va'amartem elav ko amar bincha Yosef samani Elohim la'adon l'chol Mitzrayim rida elai al ta'amod. 10. V'yashavta ve'eretz Goshen v'hayita karov elai ata uvanecha uvnei vanecha v'tzoncha uvakarcha v'chol asher lach. 11. V'chilkalti otcha sham ki od chamesh shanim ra'av pen tivaresh ata uveitcha v'chol asher lach. 12. V'hinei einechem ro'ot ve'einei achi Vinyamin kifi hamidaber aleichem. So the tension continues to build. And yes, after all that Joseph has done to his brothers, he's got to spend a whole bunch of time assuaging their guilt. He did a lot to build it up. Now he's going to spend some time forgiving them and helping them release some of their guilt that he helped to lay on them.
Well, thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.